And it's all kind of evolving into what's going to happen in Canberra. So we have two South Australian senators here who have been very concerned with the water issue. Very concerned with the Murray-Darling and stood with us in our struggles to get freshwater flows, and now are paying attention to what's the impact of mining will be on our water resources. Nick, would you like to give us your perspective on, or Sarah, you
go, Sarah.
Who wants to go first? Sarah, do you want to?
Okay,
Sarah Hanson-Young. Thank you.
I think, firstly, can I just say, I think this has been a wonderful collaboration of all the information that people need in the space of about an hour. It's a very complex issue. I'm not an expert, I'm a politician, and being able to sit here and hear what people are saying, the facts, the figures, and the raw nature of how passionate this debate has become. Obviously in Queensland, but clearly in New South Wales as well, and it is having and will have a bigger impact on the rest of the country. The questions that I have, the same questions I think other people in the community have. What are the health concerns? What are the health impacts? We saw the ad before with the mother explaining about the child whose nose was bleeding and having headaches. And we can't just dismiss that. We actually need to know why. We need to have the certainty about the health issues. Health concerns, the environmental impact, the long-term effects of this stuff, and food security and water security. And of course that is crucial. We know we're in a drying climate, particularly for those of us in South Australia. We know that the impact of what happens in other places beyond our state borders is always going to impact on us. We've had for generations over allocation of water in the Murray-Darling Basin, and we cop it year in, year out because of that. And I think the idea of saying, oh, fingers crossed, toes crossed, she'll be right, mate, we've learned from experience that that is not good enough. So we actually do need to take these concerns very seriously. Now, we've talked about regulation and the need for regulation. I think it's really important to remember that Andrew has said, go and talk to farmers, and we talk through the issues and we get agreement. Well, the point is they don't need agreement at the moment from the farmers. So there's a few stages in terms of federal regulation that I think we can be looking at. The idea of giving farmers and landholders more rights over how their land gets used. We need a moratorium on any new coal seam gas expansions or wells until we know what the health impacts are, until we know what the impacts on the groundwater will be, until we know really the impact of these chemicals that are blasted deep into the ground, and we think that that just goes away, and it just beggars belief. Of course it doesn't, and it's going to have an impact. So we need that assurance, we need that certainty, we need the science. So a moratorium is what the Greens are calling for. We want landholders to have more rights over who can use their property for these types of things. And my Greens colleague, new Senator from Queensland, Larissa Waters, is responsible for the mining portfolio for us, and she's introduced a bill into the Senate which started being debated, was it last week, I think? And this is a test now for the other players in the Parliament, because we can't just say that this stuff is a concern. If it's a concern, we need to act on it. Let's put proper regulation around ownership. And then the other issue which Tim went to, the water trigger in the EPBC Act, making sure that that has to get considered before any of these projects are made. Tony Windsor is introducing a bill into the House, and the Greens will be introducing the same bill into the Senate.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Di. I agree with Sarah that here has got an opportunity to bring about some change. We're in a unique situation in the Parliament. It's the first minority government in 70 years. We're only one heart attack away from another election, or someone getting a UN posting in due season. I think we really need to grasp the opportunity sooner rather than later, because we are running out of time. I have no idea how long this government will last, because it is on the knife edge. And my friend and colleague Andrew Wilkie, he means what he says about the government acting on poker machines, so that will make the government even more brittle if it doesn't deliver by May of next year. So we've got an opportunity to do something. We need to do it very quickly. I think it's clear, and I've got to say to Ruth, for Ruth's lecture on constitutional law, if only my lecture was back in 1976, we're as clear as you were on any common law lectures. And I did pass a note to Ruth and asked her a question about the difference between South Australia and Queensland. I think we are in a slightly better position, but certainly if 400 metres around the home. But there are some deep systemic problems, and good on Andrew for being here. He reminded me that we went to uni together, and sorry, I can't remember people I met 10 minutes ago, not 30 years ago, 35 years ago. But we were in the same student accommodation. And you made a lot of noise, I think, back then. It was me. Look, I think to be fair to Santos, I wouldn't put them in the same category as some of the cowboys we see who are trying to, mine in suburban Sydney. I mean, the stupidity of it. And some of those guys, those operators, all they do is they get the exploration and they flog it off. I mean, they're just pure speculators. But I think the point made by Sarah is quite right. There's a disparity of bargaining power at the moment. It's a bit like being a food supplier and you can only go to Coles and Woolworths for 80% of your market. You have to give in, whatever you say, you can't tell them to get stuff because eventually you have to deal with them. We need to change the law so that there is some real equality of bargaining power. We need to have an interaction between ground surface, what's above the ground and below the ground, because right now there's a disparity. We have below the ground is covered by mining acts largely, above the ground is farmers' rights. But when there's an interconnect between the two, as there is with this, the law can't handle it. I'm pretty disgusted from what I've heard from Tim Duddy about their battles. The law has changed retrospectively. It's one of the, another shining moment for the dying days of the Keneally government. Was it Keneally or was
yes.
Was it Keneally government? Although I imagine the Liberals supported that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it was bipartisan bastardry. So really that's what happened there. But the fact is the government needs Tony Windsor more than I think Tony needs the government. So we've got an opportunity now to bring about some reform. We've got to do it quickly. I'm looking forward to the bill will be debated in the Senate, but ultimately we need to get a bill through the lower house. The fact that you have Alan Jones, Gedda, Bob Brown, Bob Catter, Barnaby Joyce, all saying similar things. It's pretty weird, really. I'm not sure if that's what Bob Catter meant by the new paradigm. The weird paradigm. So, for goodness sakes, this is a great forum, but we need to bring about change very quickly because we're running out of time. I don't know what's going to happen in 12 months from now, and that's why Tim's role is critical. We need to have some equality of bargaining power and some equity in terms of the long-term impact on our farming land, because farming land is forever. This stuff isn't. Thanks.
Thank you. We've now come to the end of the first part of the Q&A, and at this stage we were going to be seated around tables, but because we had such an overwhelming response to this forum, we changed the configuration of the seats so we could put more people in. So I'm now going to ask you to be very imaginative and get yourself into small groups, which means turning around to talk to your neighbour. So maybe just talk around, and what you're going to do is just for a few minutes talk to each other, because we're in this together, talk to each other and come up with what is your question on coal seam gas, and then we'll come back to the panel and ask them that. Because you've been group within the Murray-Darling Basin, Steve Ross, and he hasn't been able to be with us today. We tried to do a Skype connection, and he's had a series of things because anybody that works in Indigenous affairs, particularly Indigenous people, are always running in 100 different directions, just servicing so many different departments that always want input. But what Steve has done for us is he's put together a little video, so we're going to see him now. So this is Steve Ross talking to us about the Indigenous concerns about water and mining in the basins. Thank you. Go Steve.
G'day, my name is Steve Ross. I'm a Wangawanga traditional owner from Xenophon in southern New South Wales. I've been asked by the organisers of your conference to talk about the importance of water for Indigenous people and the dangers that coal seam mining and fracking represents for that interest in water. My people have lived on country for thousands of years, like other Indigenous people from around the world. And water is a very significant part of our story on country. Healthy country equals healthy people, and part of that story is that healthy water equals healthy people. I think what we've seen in the last 70 years in the Murray-Darling Basin is a major decline in the health of the river systems, and associated with that is a decline in the health of the Indigenous people within the Murray-Darling Basin. There are over 70,000 Indigenous people within the Murray-Darling Basin, representing some 15% of the national Indigenous population. So a very significant player within the Murray-Darling Basin are Indigenous peoples who have a right to land and water within the basin. The Murray and its tributaries, the creeks, Billabong, the other rivers that flow into the Murray and the Darling are one ecological entity and should be managed as one ecological entity. And they should be seen as sacred. Really, that ecosystem should be World Heritage listed. It is that significant to the planet. For Indigenous peoples, the rivers represent the lifeblood of our people. It provided everything we ever needed for the last thousands of years, for the last millennium. And it would be a pity to see anything danger that connection to country. And coal seam mining and fracking represents such a danger. It can affect water tables, the groundwater. It can also affect surface water. And groundwater and artesian water is very little understood by mainstream Australia in terms of how it works, let alone its importance to Indigenous people. So it would seem to me that your own science does not back up coal seam mining or fracking processes. In terms of how contaminated water will impact Indigenous people, one, the connectivity of country, the connectivity of water to country, the fact that the rivers flow for thousands of kilometres through country means that any contamination could endanger more than the source of any contamination. It can endanger sites and ecosystems downstream. For Indigenous peoples, this could mean a significant step backward. Over the last few years, there have been significant gains by Indigenous people in terms of the recognition of rights to land and water, and we seem to be at a point where we can make a great step forward with the handback of major river red gum forests. There's no point having a major forest handback if you don't have proper water to water those forests, and that doesn't just mean quantity, it also means quality, and anything that undermines that quality can undermine the health of those systems. And anything that undermines the health of those systems could therefore affect our access to country, our cultural economy, the ability to look after our sites and practice our culture, and therefore the future generations of Indigenous people in this country can be affected by practices that are supported now. So I hope you're successful in your endeavours in stopping coal seam mining in the Murray-Darling Basin throughout the country, and good luck.